She was born in a small town where the nights were quiet, and the streets carried the sound of crickets and the distant hum of passing trains. From the moment she opened her eyes, her world was different from others. Except she never really opened them. She was blind since birth. Doctors told her mother that she would never see colors, faces, or the sunrise. But her mother used to whisper in her ear, "You don't need eyes to see the beauty of this world, my dear. You'll find your own way to feel it." Her name was Lila. From her earliest years, she loved sounds. The sound of rain against the window, the wind brushing through the trees, the laughter of children down the street. Each sound was like a painting to her. But the one sound that touched her most was the piano. There was an old cafe near their small apartment, and every evening music would float through the open window. She would sit near the wall and press her ear against it, listening as if she were hearing something sacred. One day she asked her mother, "What does a piano look like?" Her mother smiled softly. "It's a big wooden box with black and white keys. When you press them, it sings." Lila tilted her head and said, "Then I want to make it sing too." Her mother worked long hours at a sewing shop. Money was always tight, but she noticed how serious her daughter was about the piano. Every night she would listen to recordings on the old radio, tapping her fingers on the table as if she could play along. Her mother started saving, even skipping her own meals sometimes. It took almost a year before she could buy an old second-hand piano from a neighbor who was moving away. The day it arrived, Lila's small hands trembled as she touched the keys for the first time. "It's cold," she whispered, "but it feels alive." From that day on, the piano became her world. She would spend hours trying to copy the melodies she heard on the radio. She couldn't see the notes, but she could feel the difference in sound and emotion between each one. Her ears became her eyes. Her mother often stood by the doorway, watching her daughter smile as she played even when the room was dark. At first, it was just a hobby, but soon her neighbors started gathering outside the window just to listen. There was something magical about how she played, soft, emotional, full of heart. She didn't just play notes. She told stories through them. Some days when she played, people said it felt like she was describing her dreams through music. But not everyone believed in her. Some people whispered that it was pointless. "What can a blind girl do with music?" they said. "She'll never perform on stage." Lila overheard those words one evening and quietly cried beside her piano. When her mother found her, she knelt beside her and said gently, "People see with their eyes, but you see with your heart." "That's something they'll never understand." Those words stayed with her. From then on, Lila promised herself she would prove them wrong. She learned by listening. Every sound, every pause, every emotion hidden in a piece, she remembered it all. While other children read sheet music, she built her own way of learning. When her mother couldn't afford lessons, she asked a local retired teacher, an elderly man who once played in an orchestra, to teach her. At first, he hesitated. He wasn't sure how to train someone who couldn't see the notes. But after hearing her play a simple tune perfectly, just by listening once, he agreed. Their lessons were different from normal ones. He would describe the position of her fingers, the weight of her touch, and the feeling of each key. She listened carefully, adjusting her movement by instinct. Within months, she began to master pieces that took others years to learn. The teacher would often say, "You don't play the piano, Lila, you speak through it." By the time she was 16, she could play pieces by great composers just by hearing them once. Her teacher encouraged her to apply to a music academy in the city. It was one of the most respected institutions in the country, known for training the best pianists. Lila hesitated at first. "Would they even accept someone like me?" she asked quietly. Her teacher placed his hand gently on hers. "They will, because you don't just play music. You live it." Her mother supported the idea even though it meant using most of her savings. They traveled together to the city for the audition. The building was enormous, with polished floors and grand chandeliers. Lila couldn't see them, but she could feel the echo of her footsteps in the wide halls and the faint hum of pianos being practiced behind closed doors. As she waited for her turn, she could hear other students talking. Some whispered about her blindness. "Is she really going to play?" one of them said with a laugh. "How will she even find the right keys?" Another said, "Maybe they're just being nice to let her try." Lila sat quietly, folding her hands in her lap. Her heart was racing, but she didn't let the words sink in. When her name was called, she walked to the stage, guided by her mother's hand. The room fell silent. A panel of judges sat in front, their expressions unreadable. One of them asked, "Do you have your sheet music?" "I don't need one," she said softly. There was a brief silence. Someone chuckled under their breath. Then she sat at the piano, closed her eyes, not that it made any difference, and placed her hands on the keys. For a moment the world was completely still, and then she began to play. The melody flowed like water, each note wrapping around the room. It wasn't perfect in the technical sense, there were tiny slips, but it had soul. It was pure and emotional, filled with warmth and honesty. When she finished, there was silence again, but a different kind of silence. The kind that comes after something real touches your heart. The judges whispered among themselves. Finally, one said, "Thank you. We'll let you know." Days later, a letter arrived. She wasn't accepted. The reason was written clearly: lack of technical precision and reading ability. Lila folded the letter carefully and placed it inside a drawer. Her mother was heartbroken. "You played beautifully," she said. "They just couldn't see it." Lila smiled faintly. Maybe they couldn't hear it either. But deep inside, the rejection hurt. She stopped playing for a few days, sitting silently by the window listening to the world outside. Then one night her mother found her back at the piano, her hands gliding over the keys. She was playing a new tune, one she had never played before. It was sad, hopeful, and beautiful all at once. Her mother stood there quietly, tears in her eyes. "What's that song?" she asked. Lila smiled. "It's called Maybe Someday." From that moment she began to practice harder than ever before. She didn't play to prove anything anymore. She played because music was her sight, her language, her freedom. Each note she played seemed to paint pictures only she could see. Neighbors began gathering again outside her window. This time even strangers came to listen. Someone recorded a short clip of her playing and posted it online. Within days it spread like wildfire. People from around the world left comments, amazed at the blind girl who played with such emotion. "I can feel her heart through the music," one person wrote. Another said, "She doesn't need eyes to see beauty. She creates it." For the first time, Lila realized that her gift could reach people far beyond her small town. She didn't need a fancy school to validate her. Her music already spoke to hearts around the world, and though she didn't know it yet, this was only the beginning of something far greater, something that would one day take her from a small-town girl to a name known by millions. But for now, she was just a blind girl sitting beside her old piano, her fingers moving gently over the keys, lost in the world she could feel but never see. And in that world, everything was beautiful. Months passed after the failed audition, but Lila didn't let the rejection break her. She kept practicing every single day. Music had become her way of breathing. Her small house was always filled with soft melodies that carried through the neighborhood. People often stopped outside, listening in silence. For them, it wasn't just music, it was emotion turned into sound. Her mother sometimes joked, "You've become famous in this street." But Lila didn't care about fame. She just wanted to play. It was her peace, her escape, and her way of expressing everything she couldn't put into words. One day, a big announcement came to town. A world-famous pianist named Victor Renard was visiting for a charity concert. His name was known everywhere: magazines, television, newspapers. People said he could play faster than anyone else and had performed in the grandest halls around the world. Tickets to his concerts usually sold out in minutes. The whole town was talking about it. Posters were hung on every corner. There was also news that Victor was holding an open audition before his concert, inviting local talents to play for him. The winner would get a chance to perform on stage with him for one night. It was a dream opportunity. When Lila heard the news, her heart skipped a beat. Her mother immediately said, "You should try. You never know." But Lila hesitated. Why would someone like him care about a girl like me? He plays in front of kings and presidents. Her mother touched her hand gently. "You don't play for kings. You play for hearts. Go show him that." The day of the audition arrived. The town's cultural center was packed with young musicians carrying their instruments. The air was filled with nervous excitement. Lila wore her simple blue dress and held her cane tightly as her mother guided her inside. People whispered as they noticed her. "She's blind," one boy said. "How will she read the notes?" Another murmured. Lila ignored the whispers. She focused on the sound of the piano being played in the background. Each performance before hers sounded perfect, polished, but something about them felt cold. They were all chasing perfection, not emotion. Finally, her name was called. Her mother squeezed her hand. "You can do this," she whispered. Lila walked carefully toward the stage. She could hear the murmur of the crowd fade as she found her way to the piano with the help of an assistant. When she sat down, she could feel a pair of eyes watching her closely. It was Victor Renard himself, sitting among the judges. He spoke with a voice that carried confidence and pride. "You are the blind pianist I've heard about?" he asked. "Yes, sir," she replied softly. He gave a slight chuckle. "Interesting. Do you have your music sheet?" "I don't use one. I play by ear." The room grew quiet. Then Victor leaned back in his chair and said, half smiling, "Music is not just feeling, young lady. It is precision, discipline, and control. Without sight, how do you expect to understand structure or rhythm properly?" Lila's hands trembled slightly, but she stayed calm. "Maybe I don't see the notes," she said quietly, "but I feel them. I feel what they're trying to say." A few people in the audience giggled softly. Victor shook his head, his expression unimpressed. "Very well. Let's hear you then." Lila took a deep breath and placed her fingers on the keys. The moment she began to play, the atmosphere changed. Her music was gentle at first, almost like a whisper, and then it grew, filled with warmth and strength. The melody spoke of hope, pain, and beauty. It wasn't perfect by technical standards, but it had something no one else's performance did: heart. The audience fell silent. Even Victor leaned forward slightly, his expression shifting from amusement to curiosity. When the last note faded, there was a moment of stillness before a soft murmur rippled through the hall. People were moved, though they didn't know what to say. Lila stood up slowly and smiled. "Thank you," she said politely. Victor didn't clap. He crossed his arms and said, "That was emotional, yes. But music is not about emotion alone. You lack form, precision, and discipline. You play like a poet, not a professional." The words hit her like a knife. Lila bowed her head. "I understand," she whispered. Her mother, sitting in the audience, clenched her hands tightly. As Lila turned to leave, Victor added one last comment, quietly, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "Perhaps if you could see the music, you would understand it better." The audience gasped softly. Lila froze for a moment. Then she nodded respectfully, said nothing, and walked off the stage. Her mother met her backstage, tears shining in her eyes. "You did beautifully," she said, holding her daughter close. But Lila barely spoke the entire way home. That night, she sat by her piano in silence. She touched the keys gently, as if asking them why the world couldn't hear what she felt. Finally, she whispered, "Maybe I wasn't good enough." Her mother came over and said softly, "No, my love. You were too good for those who can't listen." For days after that, Lila didn't play. The piano sat untouched. Every time she walked by it, she felt a deep ache inside. She replayed Victor's words in her mind again and again. "You lack form. You play like a poet." But one night, something inside her changed. She sat down at the piano again. The moonlight slipped through the window, and though she couldn't see it, she could feel its warmth on her face. Slowly, she began to play. Not the way she used to, but differently. With more fire, more determination, and more soul. Every note carried her anger, her sadness, and her promise to herself. "I'll make them listen," she whispered. From that night on, she practiced like never before. She spent hours memorizing pieces just by sound. Her teacher noticed her intensity and asked, "What drives you now?" She simply replied, "A man told me I can't see music. I'm going to show him that I can feel it better than anyone ever could." Word spread about her performance at the audition and what Victor had said. Some people mocked her, but others admired her strength. A local journalist even wrote a small piece about her, titled "The Blind Girl Who Played from the Heart." It caught attention online, and soon more people started watching her videos. Her mother began recording short clips of her playing different songs. Lila would sit at the piano with a soft smile, her fingers moving gracefully over the keys. Each time she played, more people shared her music. Comments poured in from strangers around the world. They said her music made them cry, made them remember their childhood, or gave them hope. One message stood out to her. It said, "I saw your video today. You reminded me that music is not seen, it's felt. Thank you for helping me believe again." That message gave Lila the strength to keep going. Months passed and her online following grew. But deep down, she still remembered that day. The laughter, the dismissive tone, the sting of being judged for something she couldn't control. Every note she played was now a message to that moment. Her teacher noticed the change too. "Your playing has become deeper," he said. "You've turned pain into passion." "That's rare," Lila smiled faintly. "I guess that's what happens when you're mocked for something you love." Her mother sometimes worried. "You're pushing yourself too hard," she said. Lila shook her head gently. "I'm not pushing myself. I'm chasing the sound I hear inside me. I just want to reach it." Little did she know her journey was far from over. The same man who mocked her, the same world-famous pianist, would soon cross paths with her again, in a place where the whole world would be watching. But next time she wouldn't be the one walking off the stage in silence, because she wasn't just a blind girl anymore. She was an artist finding her voice, and her music was becoming louder than the doubts that once surrounded her. After that day, Lila's life slowly began to change. The pain of being mocked by someone she admired had left a deep scar, but it also planted something else inside her, a quiet fire that refused to die. Every morning she woke up before sunrise, sat at her piano and practiced until her fingers ached. The more she played, the stronger her heart became. She wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. She was trying to find her true sound, the one that spoke louder than words. Her mother often stood at the door, listening in silence. Sometimes she brought her a cup of tea and whispered, "Take a little rest, my dear." But Lila would smile and say, "Just one more song." Her teacher, the old musician who believed in her from the start, noticed the difference in her playing too. He said her music had changed. It carried more emotion, more depth, as if each note was telling a story. At night, when the town grew quiet, Lila would record short clips of her playing. Her mother would upload them online. At first, only a few people watched, but slowly her audience began to grow. People from other cities and even from other countries started commenting. Some said her music helped them sleep. Others said it made them cry. One person wrote, "You don't play with your hands, you play with your soul." Those words touched Lila deeply. She realized that maybe she didn't need a big stage to be heard. Maybe she just needed to keep playing from her heart. Weeks turned into months and her videos began reaching thousands of people. A few small newspapers wrote about the blind girl with the golden touch. Invitations started coming from local events asking her to perform. The first time she performed in front of a real audience after the audition, she was terrified. Her hands trembled as she sat down at the piano. The hall was small, filled with about 100 people. The light above her was warm, and she could hear the faint sound of the audience whispering. She took a deep breath and began to play. The first few seconds were shaky, but then she found her rhythm. The melody filled the room, soft at first, then strong and full of feeling. When she finished, there was silence for a heartbeat and then a wave of applause. People stood up cheering for her. Lila smiled through her tears. For the first time, she wasn't afraid anymore. She realized something important that night. Music didn't belong to the few who followed rules perfectly. It belonged to those who felt it, who lived it. After that, she was invited to perform at more events. Her mother traveled with her everywhere, always sitting in the front row. Each time she played, more people came to listen. It wasn't about fame, it was about connection. Her music made people feel understood, and that was her greatest gift. But the memory of that audition never left her completely. Sometimes, late at night, she would still hear Victor Renard's voice in her mind saying, "You play like a poet, not a professional." Those words didn't hurt her anymore. They motivated her. She wanted to become both, a poet and a professional. She wanted to show the world that art didn't need to be perfect to be powerful. Her teacher began giving her advanced lessons. He taught her how to understand rhythm in her own way, by counting the beats through touch and breathing. He told her, "You don't need to see the keys to control them. Let the sound guide you." She practiced scales, arpeggios, and complex pieces for hours, often losing track of time. Sometimes she fell asleep beside the piano, her hands still resting on the keys. Her mother would cover her with a blanket and whisper, "You're going to make the world listen one day." One evening, while scrolling through messages on her social media page, her mother found something surprising. A well-known music blogger had written an article about her journey, titled "The Blind Pianist Who Teaches the World to Feel." The story went viral overnight. Suddenly, Lila's inbox was flooded with messages. Journalists, reporters, even talent agents wanted to talk to her. At first, it was overwhelming. She wasn't used to attention. But she stayed humble. Whenever someone interviewed her, she always said, "I'm not special. I just play what I feel." Her honesty made people love her even more. She began to receive invitations from bigger cities to perform at charity events and music festivals. Each performance was a step closer to her dream. The audiences grew larger, but she never forgot where she came from. She still lived in her small home with the same old piano that had once been bought with her mother's sacrifices. One day, she received an invitation that took her breath away. It was from the organizers of an international music competition. They wanted her to participate as one of the contestants. The letter said that Victor Renard, the same famous pianist who once mocked her, would be one of the judges. Lila froze when she heard his name. For a long moment, she didn't say anything. Then she smiled softly. "Maybe it's time," she said. Her mother looked worried. "Are you sure you want to face him again?" "Yes," Lila replied. "Not to prove him wrong. I just want him to hear me now." The next few weeks were full of preparation. She practiced harder than ever. Her teacher helped her polish every detail, guiding her through pieces that tested her limits. She practiced not just classical pieces, but also her own compositions, music that came straight from her heart. During practice, she often imagined the audience, people listening in silence, waiting for the next note. She wanted her music to reach them, to make them feel what she felt when she first touched a piano. Her mother noticed how calm she seemed, even though the competition was only days away. "Aren't you nervous?" she asked. Lila smiled. "I was nervous once. Now I'm just grateful. I never thought I'd come this far." When the day finally arrived, they traveled to the city again. The venue was grand and filled with the sound of tuning instruments. Contestants from all over the world had gathered there. Everyone looked serious, dressed in their finest clothes, carrying sheet music and confidence. Lila, wearing her simple white dress, stood quietly beside her mother. She could feel the energy in the room, the tension, the excitement. Someone nearby whispered, "That's her, the blind pianist from the internet." Another person said, "She's good, but this is a professional competition. Let's see if she can really handle it." Lila just smiled. She wasn't here to compete with anyone. She was here to share her music. That night, before she went to bed, she sat by the window and whispered to herself, "Tomorrow, I will play the way I've always played." From the heart, when she closed her eyes, she thought about everything that had brought her here. The small house, her mother's endless love, her teacher's faith, the rejection, the laughter, the applause. Every memory became a part of her music. The next morning, she woke early, practiced one last time, and took a deep breath. She could hear the faint sounds of pianos being played in nearby rooms as contestants warmed up. The competition was about to begin. As she waited for her turn, she remembered her first audition, the humiliation, the quiet tears, the way she had walked off stage. But now things were different. She was different. Her mother held her hand and said softly, "No matter what happens out there, I am already proud of you." Lila smiled. "I know, Mama." She didn't know that the moment she stepped on that stage, her life would change forever again. She didn't know that her music would silence an entire hall, or that the same man who once mocked her would be left speechless by her performance. For now, all she knew was that the piano was waiting, and she was ready to tell her story again through music, the only language she truly needed. The day of the competition arrived. The hall was massive, filled with the soft sound of murmuring voices and the faint hum of instruments being tuned. It was the biggest stage Lila had ever stepped on. The lights were bright, the air slightly cold, and the atmosphere was filled with nerves and anticipation. Contestants from around the world had come to perform, each hoping to win the title that could change their lives. Lila sat quietly backstage, her fingers resting on her lap. She could hear the faint echo of someone playing on the stage, strong, fast, flawless. The crowd clapped loudly as the performance ended. She could feel her heart racing, but she tried to stay calm. Her mother sat beside her, gently holding her hand. "You're going to do beautifully," she whispered. "I'm not here to win," Lila replied softly. "I'm here to play." When her name was finally announced, the hall went silent. Some people recognized her from the stories and videos online. A few whispered, "That's the blind girl." Others leaned forward, curious. Guided by an assistant, Lila walked slowly toward the piano. The sound of her shoes against the stage floor echoed through the hall. When she reached the piano, she ran her fingers lightly along the edge, feeling its smooth surface. It wasn't just an instrument to her. It was her voice, her friend, her way of speaking to the world. Up front, sitting with the other judges, was Victor Renard. The same man who had once mocked her now looked on with a calm but slightly distant expression. He didn't recognize her at first. For him, she was just another contestant, until he heard her name. His eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of memory crossing his face. Could it really be the same girl, the one who had stood in front of him months ago, trembling yet proud? He leaned back in his chair, curious to see what she would do. The hall was so quiet that Lila could hear her own heartbeat. She took a deep breath, let her fingers find their place on the keys, and began to play. The first note was soft, almost like a whisper. Then came another, and another, forming a gentle melody that spread through the hall like a warm breeze. It wasn't a song people recognized. It was her own composition, something she had written herself after that painful audition months ago. As the music grew, the room changed. The audience leaned forward, drawn in by the purity of the sound. It was as if every note carried a memory. The laughter, the tears, the loneliness, and the hope that had shaped her journey. Lila played with her whole being. Her hands moved gracefully, her expression calm yet filled with emotion. She couldn't see the faces before her, but she could feel their silence. She could feel the way her music touched them. Victor sat frozen in his chair. At first he tried to listen like a critic, measuring timing, tone, precision. But after a few minutes he forgot about all that. Something in her playing stirred something deep inside him, something he hadn't felt in years. He remembered why he fell in love with music in the first place. When the final note faded, the hall remained completely silent for several seconds. It was a silence filled with awe, the kind that happens when words are too small to describe what people just witnessed. Then suddenly the entire audience rose to their feet. The applause came like thunder, echoing through the hall. People were cheering, some even crying. Lila sat still for a moment, smiling faintly. She couldn't see the crowd standing for her, but she could hear their voices, their emotion. It was more than enough. Among the applause, Victor stood up slowly. His hands, which had once clapped for hundreds of performances around the world, now shook slightly. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and realized that the same girl he once mocked had just given the most powerful performance he had ever heard. When the applause finally began to quiet down, Victor stood from his seat and walked toward the stage. The hall grew quiet again, watching in surprise. Judges rarely left their seats during a performance. Lila heard the footsteps approaching and turned slightly. She recognized the sound of his voice as he spoke softly into the microphone. "I remember you," he said, the crowd murmured. Lila nodded, her hand still resting gently on the piano. "I once told you that music was more than just feeling," Victor said. His voice trembled slightly. "I was wrong. Today you reminded me that music is not about sight or perfection or control. It's about heart. You play with more truth than I ever have." The audience broke into applause again. Lila smiled, though her eyes filled with tears. She didn't say anything for a moment. She didn't need to. The music had already said everything. Finally, she whispered, "Thank you for listening this time." Victor bowed his head slightly and stepped back. For the first time in his long career, he felt humbled. The rest of the competition continued, but no performance could match the emotion that Lila had brought to the stage. When the results were announced later that evening, it was no surprise that she had won. But for Lila, it wasn't about victory. It was about being heard. After the event, journalists crowded around her, asking how it felt to win. She smiled and said simply, "I didn't win. The music did." Videos of her performance spread all over the world. People shared them with captions like, "This is what real talent sounds like," and "She made the world listen without seeing it." Victor requested to meet her privately after the event. He found her sitting in a quiet corner of the backstage area, holding her small trophy. When she heard his footsteps, she turned toward him. "I wanted to say I'm sorry," he said quietly. "When I first met you, I saw your blindness as a weakness. But now I see it was your strength. You feel music in a way most of us have forgotten. Lila smiled gently. Maybe we all see the same thing, just in different ways. He chuckled softly. You remind me of myself when I was young, before fame changed what music meant to me. He paused for a moment. Would you allow me to play with you sometime? Lila's smile grew. I'd like that very much. Weeks later, a video appeared online, a duet between the world-famous pianist and the blind girl who had once been mocked by him. The performance was breathtaking. Their playing complemented each other perfectly, his precision and her emotion blending into something unforgettable. Millions watched, shared, and commented on the video. People wrote about how beautiful it was to see humility and talent come together on the same stage. The world wasn't just amazed by the music, they were inspired by the story behind it. Lila's life changed after that. She began to travel, performing around the world, giving concerts that filled halls with emotion. But no matter where she went, she always said the same thing in every interview. Music gave me eyes when I had none. Her mother watched proudly from the audience every time, sometimes wiping away tears. She often said to her friends, she used to listen through the wall of a cafe. Now the whole world listens to her, and Victor, he became one of her biggest supporters. He often told people that meeting her was the best lesson he ever learned, one that no music school could ever teach. Years later, when someone asked Lila what her proudest moment was, she said, "The day I stopped trying to prove myself. That's the day my music finally spoke." She had gone from a blind girl in a small town to a symbol of courage and inspiration, and though she never saw the faces that smiled at her, she felt them. Every heartbeat, every clap, every tear. The world had once doubted her, but now it listened in silence every time she touched the keys. And in that silence, her story lived forever, a story not about sight but about vision. After the international competition, Lila's life changed in ways she could never have imagined. She was no longer just a blind girl from a small town. She was now someone the world watched, listened to, and admired. Yet she remained the same person at heart. She didn't seek fame or riches. Her goal had always been simple, to let music speak for her, to let people feel what she felt when she touched the keys. The days after her victory were filled with interviews, photo shoots, and invitations to perform in cities she had only ever dreamed of visiting. Every moment was a mixture of excitement and exhaustion, but she embraced it. Every stage she stepped onto was an opportunity to share her heart, and she took it seriously. One of her first performances after the competition was at a charity event for children with disabilities. The moment she arrived, she could feel the energy in the room. Children with different challenges were sitting with their families, their faces lit with curiosity and wonder. She knew what it was like to feel different, to be underestimated, to hear people whispering that you couldn't succeed. And now she was there to tell them, yes, you can. She walked to the piano and placed her hands on the keys. The first note sounded soft, almost like a gentle greeting. Then the music grew, weaving stories of hope, courage, and resilience. Some children sat wide-eyed, staring at her hands as they moved. Others closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. Lila played for nearly an hour, sharing songs she had written herself, each one inspired by her journey. After the performance, a young girl approached her. She was also blind and could barely speak because of her shyness. I want to play like you," she whispered. Lila knelt down and took her hand. "You already can. You just have to listen with your heart. The rest will follow." That small moment stayed with her. She realized that her story wasn't just about music or competitions. It was about inspiring others who had been told they couldn't. That night she decided she wanted to do more than perform. She wanted to help other children like her find their voices. She started a foundation dedicated to teaching music to visually impaired children. With the help of her mother and a few trusted friends, she organized workshops in her hometown and eventually in other cities. The foundation provided instruments, teachers, and recordings so that blind children could learn to play by ear, just as she had. The first workshop was small, only 10 children, but it was magical. She could see their excitement in the way they reached out to touch the piano, the way their fingers trembled with curiosity. She spent hours guiding them, not just teaching notes, but teaching them to feel the music, to connect with it emotionally. One little boy, who had never touched a piano before, asked her, "Will I ever be good?" Lila smiled gently. You already are. You just have to believe it. Months turned into years and the foundation grew. Children from across the country came to learn from her, and many went on to perform in public for the first time. She watched them with pride, remembering the young girl she had once been, nervous, misunderstood, and full of dreams. She knew that for them this was more than music. It was freedom. Meanwhile, her own music career continued to flourish. She performed in concert halls across the world, from grand theaters in Europe to festivals in Asia. Audiences cheered not just for her talent, but for the story she carried. People were moved by the idea that someone who had been mocked, doubted, and underestimated could rise above it all and touch hearts everywhere. Victor Renard remained a close friend and mentor. He often performed duets with her, but now he did so with genuine respect and admiration. Sometimes after concerts he would say quietly, "You remind me why I started playing music in the first place." Lila had learned something powerful from their journey together. People might judge, mock, or doubt you, but if you stay true to yourself, your voice will be heard. And sometimes your music or your actions can change even the most hardened hearts. One day, after a performance in a packed theater, a young woman came backstage. She was a music student and told Lila that she had watched videos of her playing for years before finally summoning the courage to pursue music herself. "I always thought I couldn't do it," the young woman said, tears in her eyes. "But watching you, I believe now." Lila smiled and held her hand. "That's all I ever wanted, to make people believe in themselves." Even though her days were busy, she never stopped practicing. She composed new pieces constantly, each one inspired by the people she met, the stories she heard, and the places she visited. Some pieces were joyful and lively, others sad and reflective, but all carried a message of hope and courage. Her mother often reminded her, "Don't forget to take care of yourself too." Lila would laugh softly. "Music is what takes care of me, and sharing it is what keeps me alive." Despite her busy schedule, she made sure to return to her hometown often. She would visit the foundation, sit with the children, and sometimes play small informal concerts in local cafes. She never wanted to forget the place where her journey began, the small apartment, the old piano, the neighborhood that first listened to her music without judgment. The world celebrated her success, but Lila stayed humble. She often said in interviews, "I'm not special. I'm just someone who listened." And people believed her because there was a quiet truth in her words. Her music wasn't about talent alone, it was about listening, feeling, and sharing. Over time, she became more than just a musician. She became a symbol of hope. Articles, books, and documentaries were made about her life. Children wrote letters to her, sharing how her story had given them courage. Some even said that her music helped them through illness, loneliness, or loss. One evening, after a long concert in a foreign city, Lila sat quietly at her piano, reflecting on her journey. She remembered the first time she had touched a piano, feeling its cold keys and imagining the music inside. She remembered the famous pianist who had mocked her, the rejection letters, the long nights of practice, and the small audiences that had first listened to her, and she smiled. Because every step, every struggle, every tear had led her to this moment. She had turned every doubt into determination, every insult into inspiration. She had shown the world that limitations were only what others believed them to be. Her mother joined her in the quiet room. "You've done more than I ever imagined," she said softly. Lila held her mother's hand. "I just kept listening," she said. "And now the world is listening too." Years later, when people asked her what advice she would give to anyone facing obstacles, she would say, "Never let anyone define your limits. Listen to your heart, follow your passion, and keep playing. One day, someone will hear the music only you can create." Her story had come full circle. The blind girl who had once been mocked, doubted, and underestimated had grown into a woman whose music inspired millions. She had transformed pain into purpose, silence into song, and doubt into hope. And though she had never seen the world with her eyes, she had changed it with her heart. The small girl who had pressed her fingers against an old piano in a quiet apartment had grown into a symbol of courage, determination, and the undeniable power of believing in oneself. Through her foundation, she continued to give children the chance to find their own voices. Through her music, she gave the world a reason to listen with their hearts. And through her life, she proved something simple yet profound: that true vision comes not from the eyes, but from the soul. Every time she played, whether in a small room or a grand concert hall, she remembered the journey, the laughter, the tears, the doubt, and the victories, and she smiled, knowing that the music would keep going, touching hearts long after the final note faded. The world had once doubted her, but now the world listened, and it would never forget.